2nd century BCE until the mid-20th century CE, Confucianism would be the single most important force in Chinese life. To the casual observer, both Chinese philosophy and Chinese religion appear to be entirely alien to Western philosophy and religion. For example, each of the three main Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, affirms a belief in God as pivotal to their systems of faith. Chinese religion focuses more on human conduct. Some scholars question whether or not the Chinese are, or ever have been, a religious people at all. They also question whether the ancient Chinese had gods, myths and heroes, as did most ancient cultures, like the Greeks, the Japanese, the Hindus of India and others. But if we look beyond the surface and examine Chinese religion and philosophy in depth, we find that in some ways they are not so different from Western culture after all. For example, both the Chinese and the Western traditions emphasize the value of rational thought, the role of morals in social relations, and the belief that the individual soul is connected to the transcendent. To start, we must look back more than 2 millennia to an intense awakening around the world. This span of about 6 centuries, from 800 BCE to 200 BCE, produced the classic Greek and Indian philosophers, the Hebrew prophets, and the great Chinese teacher Confucius. Recent Confucianist scholarship has become in some ways a quest for the historical Confucius, a description of him as a real person rather than an image of popular veneration. The historical figure we know as Confucius actually was a man born as Kong Qiu, who lived from about 551 to 479 BCE, and for 2 millennia was known only within parts of what we today call China. The westernized name Confucius actually was coined by Catholic missionaries who went to China in the late 16th century. The young man who came to be known as Confucius, or Master Kong, and then as Confucius in the West, grew up in the ancient state of Lu in northeastern China. Kong's parents apparently died when he was a child. At one point in his life, he traveled for about 10 years. He visited many other feudal states of his time, seeking but never finding a ruler who would use his advice. At the age of 50, Confucius became a type of police commissioner in his home state. It was the highest public office he ever held, but he remained in office for only about a year. In his old age, Kong devoted more time to teaching disciples, whilst also occupying himself with music, poetry, and occasional conversations with rulers or ministers. Kong always regarded himself as a student. Yet Kong regarded himself also as a teacher. He insisted that no one should be denied an education because of lowly birth or poor finances. Though Kong saw himself as a transmitter rather than a creator, he had a strong sense of his own mission. Indeed, Kong's impact changed Chinese society. For example, before Kong, the word shi, meaning gentleman, had applied only to men of high birth, for example, to military officers or knights. After Kong, shi applied to scholars, who now ascended to the top of the social ladder. Soldiers came to be despised. A gentleman was called Qin shi, literally meaning son of a prince. But Kong's teachings transformed the meaning of the word so that a gentleman now became someone of high moral character. In this way, he and other humanist philosophers heralded a new age of ethical wisdom. To understand his originality, we have to understand how things had been before him. Archaeological studies clearly demonstrate that the people of ancient China practiced sacrifice, divination, and ancestral rituals. 4,000 years ago, at the dawn of Chinese history, these practices were common, and they qualify as what we would call religious. Scholars have debated whether Confucianism is a philosophical doctrine, a religious teaching, or both. The English word religion is commonly associated with institutional religion, which usually includes a priesthood, a belief system, and a ritual. Yet Confucianism is not associated with any priesthood. It does not teach that a god or gods should be worshipped, and it does not contemplate the possibility of life after death. Confucianism is not even associated, strictly speaking, with any dogmatic propositions or belief systems. But it does embrace a system of ritual that has some religious significance. For this reason, among others, Confucianism also may be called, in a very broad sense, a religion.
It's a moral philosophy, as are all religions. It's an explanatory system of how the universe operates, how power and causality are experienced by human beings. In Confucianism, the sense of power is something that's internally located rather than located externally in some powerful forces that need to be controlled, need to be supplicated, need to be a source of happiness or healing. Many of the feelings that people have about awe and reverence are satisfied in most religions by reference to a relationship with the deity. In Confucianism, such emotional experiences are located in human relationships.
The major work about Confucius, entitled The Analects, offers further insight into Kong's own self-consciousness. It exposes his high regard for rituals and for the virtue and propriety that flow from them. Kong's personality clearly had a religious character, with a profound reverence for the will of heaven. The Analects are a record of Kong's conversation with his disciples, and these are the best sources for learning his teachings. Yet Confucianism, as a school of thought, regards as its special texts a collection of books from widely divergent genres, and these books are known as the classics. In Kong's time, there were 6 classics. The first of them was the Book of Changes, also known as I Ching, and it was a study of the interaction between the two cosmic forces, yin and yang. These two great forces represent not mere opposites, but also partners in creative processes. They are seen in manifestations such as passivity and activity, feminine and masculine influences, darkness and light, and so on. Change is seen as the interaction between yin and yang, the opposing principles that shape the destinies of all creatures and all things. The Book of Changes is well known today in the West as a divination manual, and yin and yang have become the symbols of Chinese religion. A second classic was the Book of History. This was a collection of historical documents that included speeches by early kings and ministers. The Book of Songs was a collection of poetry that included folk songs and more formal ritual hymns. The Classic of Rites included a collection of rituals called the Ceremonials, a primer on ancient state etiquette and instructions for organizing the bureaucracy. The fifth classic was the Spring-Autumn Annals, a chronicle of Kong's native state of Lu. A sixth classic, the Book of Music, no longer exists.
Most of the Confucian teachings are moral precepts. A precept shared between Confucianism and the Western tradition, for example, is that the Confucianist state, don't do unto others what you don't want done unto you, whereas in the Western tradition, it is stated in more positive terms, do unto others. So what you find common in all religions are moral precepts, and this is, I would say, the backbone of Confucianist treatises.
The core of many of these classical writings precedes Kung's time. The writings evolved over a long period, and they also continued to be expanded long after Kung died. In the year 213 BCE, after uniting the country by the sword, the Qin emperor ordered that the books be burned. Thanks to scholarly memory and a few surviving fragments, the writings were later restored. The Han dynasty, which lasted some 4 centuries from 206 BCE to 220 CE, marked a great change in Chinese civilization. China became even more thoroughly humanist, developing a strong interest in philosophy, history, literature, and politics. In 124 BCE, the Han government established the Imperial University to educate future government officials in Confucian ideals. To avoid the disastrous consequences of another book burning, the classical writings now were inscribed in stone. Some say that the great merit of Confucianism is that it discovers the ultimate in the relative. That is, it finds ultimate meaning in the moral character of human relationships. Kung taught a doctrine of reciprocity and neighborliness. He said anyone can be a gentleman if he's taught the proper virtues. So he established China's first private school of higher education. Kung's school was devoted mostly to the art of government and to developing the moral sensibilities of the students. One of the best-known concepts of Confucianism is that of the so-called 5 relationships. These relationships are between a ruler and his minister, father and son, husband and wife, elder brother and younger brother, and friend to friend. Each of the 5 relationships imposes mutual and reciprocal responsibilities. A government minister owes loyalty to his ruler, and a child owes respect to his parents. But the ruler must in turn care for his subjects, as the parents must care for the child. Kung's central doctrine is the virtue of zhen, which is the affection and love involved in human relationships. For parents and kin, they reserved a special kind of love because the roots of zhen are filial piety and brotherly respect. Confucianism acknowledges the natural love involved in kinship. It also recognizes the natural feelings aroused by a neighbor's need for help. Any neighbor. For the follower of Confucius, a parent's love for his or her children extends to other people's children as well. Filial respect for the aged extends to other people's parents and to elders in general. Family relationships serve as models for social behavior in the effort to achieve universal love. One should respect his or her elders, both in the immediate family and in other people's families. We should be kind not only to our own children and juniors, but also to other people's children and juniors. Indeed, these instructions are the source of cohesiveness and solidarity within Chinese culture. But Confucianism is more than a guide to proper social behavior. It also prescribes certain rituals, including religious rituals. Confucianism has even been called a ritual religion, or Li Jiao. The Chinese ancestral cult was surrounded by ritual, as was their worship of heaven as supreme lord. Confucius stressed that it's extremely important to have proper inner disposition when we engage in a religious or social ritual. Otherwise, propriety becomes mere formalism and even hypocrisy. Confucianism calls for rational morality and the kind of virtue that produces harmonious and responsible relationships with other human beings.
Now, in the Confucianist tradition, the major virtues are harmony, realized in achieving social harmony with others, the playing down of confrontation and conflict, and the exercise of those modes of being that cause harmony to exist among human beings. So harmony is one of the chief virtues. Another chief virtue is benevolence.
Kang denied being a revolutionary. He even attributed his own ideas to the ancients. He made little impact while he was still alive, and he died in obscurity at the age of about 72, in 479 BCE. Kang was convinced that his life had been a failure, and his teachings would soon be forgotten.
Looking at these religious traditions from the standpoint of an anthropologist, one asks, what are these traditions as far as human behavior is concerned? Today, the Chinese are no longer officially or even consciously Confucian, yet many of their automatic feelings and desires and their sense of purpose is governed by their past. So many remain within the Confucianist tradition, whether they, in a sense, are believers in it or not.
Is Confucianism still relevant? If by Confucianism we mean a backward-looking ideology featuring sterile textual studies, with a rigid social hierarchy where parents permanently dominate children, men outrank women, and the past trumps the future, then it would seem to be less relevant to modern needs. But if by Confucianism we mean a dynamic assertion that every person is worthy, that moral greatness is possible, that social relationships are based on ethical values, that the self always remains open to the transcendent, then Confucianism can be the basis for a true sense of human dignity, freedom, and equality. If we are to understand the Chinese and other East Asian cultures, then we must understand both Confucianism and Taoism. Indeed, it may be said that Chinese thought has centered more generally on two sides of existence: the more active Yang side and the contemplative Yin side. The active Yang force is associated with Confucian moral and social philosophy. It is seen as a masculine force, and it has been generally dominant during periods of political unity and social order. The contemplative Yin force has been associated more with Taoism. This passive side of things can be seen in naturalism and quietism, and the Yin is seen as feminine. But the Yin and Yang forces are not mutually exclusive, and Taoism itself is often represented by a circular design with interlocking black and white shapes. Taoism is both a philosophy and also a religion, and sometimes these two forms of Taoism are quite different. The problem is compounded by the fact that every school of Chinese thought and religion uses the word Tao, which means the way. Most Taoist philosophers have a genuinely religious desire to transcend the limitations of this life. It is a quest that's as old as humanity itself. Taoist philosophers also have retreated from the world, but not so much in rejection of the evils of mortal existence. Rather, they have withdrawn in protest of oppression by human political and social institutions. At certain times, Taoist alchemists won political favor at court. At other times, Taoist masters have fought political battles with both Confucianists and Buddhists. But most Taoists have preferred to remain anonymous and reclusive, and they have kept their beliefs mysterious. Taoism has, for most of its history, been practiced under a shroud of secrecy. It began as a philosophy of recluses, and it gave rise to a religion whose followers usually have sought anonymity. Many Taoist teachings are articulated in riddles, and the followers of this esoteric circle usually have revealed its secrets only to the initiated. This shroud of secrecy has been penetrated only recently. Classical Taoist philosophy is found in two major texts. One is called Lao Tzu, named after its author. The other is called Zhuan Tzu, also named after its author. The concept of the Tao appears to be a philosophic attempt to conceptualize an earlier Chinese religious belief. In the Confucian classics, the supreme deity had been called Lord on High. The god, called Heaven, was sometimes given the role of a progenitor or creator. But in Zhuan Tzu and Lao Tzu, the Tao dominates. Here, the Tao isn't seen as a personal deity, but rather as a model for human behavior. The natural way, the human way. According to the Lao Tzu, the Tao existed before the universe. It is the unchanging ancestor of all things, the source from which everything came to be. Taoist practitioners believe they can discover this nameless first principle by following three methods: by contemplating the universe, by cultivating the proper disposition for meditation, and by adopting the proper perspective on life. In Taoism, this proper outlook is expressed by the term Wu Wei, which literally means non-action. Wu Wei is best understood not as the literal absence of action, rather it is acting without artificiality, without overaction, and without attachment to the action itself. The practical part of Lao Tzu is thus to live according to the way, a way of naturalness, simplicity, and even weakness. Yet the doctrine of non-action teaches the lesson of survival, of how to keep one's own integrity in a time of disorder. This may be the most important practical lesson of Taoist philosophy, and it was immensely important in the development of Taoist religion. Lao Tzu suggests a measure of asceticism, which is to withdraw from the world its pleasures and even its cherished values. The person seeking knowledge of the Tao should purify the senses and passions, which distort our true perception of reality. Civilization thus marks a departure from the Tao. Taoist philosophy instructs its disciples to seek harmony with nature and nature only. This is very different from pursuing the Confucian virtues of humanity and righteousness.
When we have conflict, when we do it against it, that will become disharmony. For instance, it's like the water flowing from the mountain to go to the ocean. If you put a leaf there, the leaf will follow the flow. There's no conflict. That's in harmony. But you try to make the leaf going back from the downstream going upstream, and you're pulling it with a string, or you're blowing it with your mouth, and you're making an outboard to take it up. That's conflict. You're going against the nature, against the way. So therefore, following your own nature is following the way, and that would be in harmony.
For some observers, Lao Tzu's political teachings evoke a back-to-nature sense of romanticism, but they also have been interpreted to support despotic political authority. At the site known as Ma Wangdui, a copy of the Lao Tzu was found handwritten on pieces of silk. Dating back to the 2nd century BCE, these are the oldest Lao Tzu manuscripts known to exist. The other major text in Taoism, called the Chuanzi, is like the Lao Tzu text in two important ways. First, it says that the Tao is the central principle governing the universe. Second, it shows a complete hermit-like distaste for politics. The Chuanzi resembles a collection of essays with abundant use of parables, allegory, paradox, and fanciful imagery. The Chuanzi text makes an ardent plea for spiritual freedom. Not so much freedom from social conventions and restraints, but freedom from mental limits. It calls for each person to transcend self-interest and prejudice, and it asserts that freedom can be discovered only in nature itself, in the Tao. Chuanzi's central goal is to discover absolute happiness. Its author believes that such happiness requires us to transcend the self in order to achieve perfect union with the Tao. This unification involves a higher level of knowledge, a kind of wisdom that goes beyond all distinctions between things, including life and death. Such insight may be called mystical knowledge because it cannot be acquired by ordinary means. Paradoxically, it comes only when we forget the knowledge of all things, especially knowledge of the self. The Chuanzi advocates sitting and forgetting, or Zuo Wan. It also mentions a fasting of the mind, where one empties the senses and the mind itself.
If we study all the modern science, we can never overcome such a material world. We always have some puzzle to overcome. There are more puzzle than overcome. So even we study for 100 years, 1,000 years in modern science, we still cannot understand the whole universe. But if you visualize the whole cosmos or universe from the ancient wisdom of Chinese or India, you know what's going on already. Everything is it's emptiness. It's the Tao. It's the supreme consciousness.
Taoist religion, in a way, came down from the very early times of oracle bones and divination. Taoist priests are heirs to a past society where diviners and shamans were revered for their ability to communicate with the spiritual world, the world of the Lord on high and other gods and spirits. The ancient shamans were believed to be capable of bringing rain to the dry earth and healing the sick. Human weakness and sickness were considered to be associated with sin, that is, with the things that offend both the conscience and the deity. Religious Taoists also associated healing with confessing these sins and seeking the forgiveness and help of higher powers. Yet throughout their history, Taoists have also paid a great deal of attention to physiology and pharmacology, and this has led to many contributions in Chinese medicine. Taoists believe that supernatural powers are necessary to help and protect us in this life. All of this naturally raises the question of immortality. Some people throughout history have sought earthly immortality in human form, but the universal experience of death suggests that such a quest is naive.
The real longevity is your mind is still alive after physical death. I think that's the best way to explain the post-life. If we do in some spiritual practice, diligently and regularly, then your mind might be still alive after your physical body passed away.
Well, like everybody says, death is the end of one thing, will be the beginning of the other. The death basically for our body, if we died, nothing functioning, that's the beginning of the worm, the beginning of the disintegration. Our body will turn to something else. Now, we're thinking about what happened to our mind. So every night we go to sleep, where does the mind go? We never wonder about it, we never worry about it, and we know automatically next morning we wake up in the morning. So when we die, how do we know we'll wake up in someplace else? Just we don't come back, and tell us. That is not the end. The end of our body is not the end of in the concept of eternity.
As it developed, religious Taoism showed itself to be a salvation religion. Though it taught the faithful how to live healthy lives, it sought to guide them beyond this transitory life to a happy eternity. This outlook is very different from Confucianism, which concentrates on perfecting moral conditions in this life. Taoists now began to talk of heavenly immortals who had ascended to the celestial regions. They spoke of earthly immortals who roam the sacred forests and mountains, and they believed that some human beings appear to die, but actually leave their corpses and ascend in spirit only. Because Taoists believe that men and women can become immortals, they conducted alchemical experiments that were described as an attempt to steal the secret of heaven and earth. In other words, Taoists believed that alchemy could wrest the mystery of life from nature. Although they failed to discover this elixir of immortality, their experiments eventually led to scientific developments in chemistry, medicine, and pharmacology. Such developments would come to Europe only many centuries later.
This one is quite commonly used in China as a typical liver and kidney tonic. It's also ancient Chinese Taoist longevity herbs. Normally, it's quite popular for Chinese folk remedies, for cooking as well. And this is named Goujizi.
Many Taoists resembled the alchemists of the Middle Ages that believed by the manipulation of substances one could enhance human health, even to the point of allowing a person to become immortal. And there were Chinese emperors who used Taoist priests to enhance their longevity. So these practices would be seen as Taoist practices because they were done by Taoist adepts.
Alchemy, miracle, so to speak, you will want to make things out of ordinary, right? Something not ordinary that we conceive, what we see is extraordinary, is alchemy. In another word, anything extraordinary comes from ordinary. You make extra to it, make it more different. Now, so in that sense, all things by nature has this alchemic process. You watch things grow. You put a seed on the floor, on the ground. You give the right place, right temperature, right moisture. It will grow. And that is alchemy. And alchemy is actually happening in our everyday life. We just are able to recognize it.
Throughout history, Taoists also cultivated immortal life when they developed techniques of healing, circulation, meditative exercises, and sexual hygiene. Taoism offered a truly holistic healing system based on a text from the 6th century BCE called the Inner Classic of the Yellow Emperor. This text contained a clear list of priorities for good health. First, treat the spirit. Then, get proper nutrition. Then comes physical healing. Taoism developed meditation practices that include an exercise featuring certain movements while standing with the knees slightly bent. This is believed to help restore a proper balance of energy, or what the Chinese call qi, within the body. Taoists believed that the qi travels along meridians within the body. Chinese yoga and acupuncture are based on these meridians, which have various acupuncture points.
Get rid of the toxic energy. We call it the evil wind. The wind usually attacks the top, stay there. When your vital qi is deficient, there's more chance to get some toxic energy stay there. And we need to induce the qi to get rid of the toxic energy, which mostly is the evil wind. We call it feng xie.
The Taoist religion also has regarded the human body as a kind of furnace in which to brew an elixir of immortality. This concept is based on a kind of inner alchemy associated with Taoist yoga and meditation. According to the theory behind these methods, the human body is divided into 3 areas called cinnabar fields: head, chest, and abdomen. Each field is inhabited by a number of gods, who give the body life and sustenance, while supervised by a pantheon of deities called the Taoist Triad, or Trinity. Taoists believe that life combines 3 principles. These are breath, or qi, vital essence, or jing, and spirit, known as shen. In Taoist meditation, one focuses the mind on the inner organs of the body and the gods that inhabit them. These gods are regarded as direct emanations of primordial energy in the human organism. Advanced yoga practitioners achieve something called embryonic respiration by consciously imitating a fetus in its mother's womb. This exercise recognizes the existence of important metabolic processes within the body, and psychologically it involves the quest for inner peace and the integration of the human personality. The ultimate Taoist attitude represents the apex of sitting and forgetting, a phrase that came to refer to certain meditative practices in the higher mystical tradition of Taoism. In this state of mind, symbols and images are no longer thought to be needed. One simply sits and forgets.
I would suggest that man, first of all, he has a body, he has a mind. He breathes in between, you know. If his body is healthy, relatively is healthy, his mind is peaceful, then he can solve all the problems. Now, what are the way to do that? I would simply say that stop your world. Don't do anything. To don't do anything means you do not create, you do not think. Now, what is the thinking is, you said worry. What is worry? You create a situation, so you think you cannot do it, so you worry. So you do not create this situation at that moment, then you will not worry. When you don't worry, then you'll be able to figure out some way.
While on Earth, aspiring immortals should seek progress in meditation and daily living. They should treat worldly necessities, such as food and clothing, as a means to an end, to be used and abandoned. Humans should detach themselves from sensual attractions. They also should eliminate enmity and hatred, which injure the one who hates. The aging body is like a house with rotted walls, soon to be exchanged for a new one. All this demands utter equanimity towards life and death, sickness and health, gain and loss, wealth and poverty. In other words, one must go beyond the normal values and concerns of worldly life, finding peace and contentment within all the turmoil in order to focus attention on a greater end. Some scholars say that Taoist philosophy and religion elevates feminine characteristics more than Confucianism does. An examination of Lao Tzu supports this thesis. It refers to the Tao as the mother of all things, and it seems to favor soft, feminine-like images such as water, valleys, and emptiness. Lao Tzu thus implicitly recognizes the Tao as the mother of the world. To Confucianists, Tao refers to the fundamental principle of moral philosophy, but when we discuss the meaning of Tao in the texts of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, we refer to a universal Tao, the all-inclusive way. Though this still is a fundamentally philosophical meaning of the word Tao, it also has a religious dimension. Philosophical Taoism was only one of many sources that converged to create religious Taoism. Another source was the Yin-Yang school, which sought to comprehend the natural order in terms of two complementary yet antithetical forces. Yet another source was the school of the 5 elements or agents, which held that 5 physical substances, metal, wood, water, fire and earth, represent cosmic forces. The Yin-Yang school and the school of 5 elements both helped the Chinese in their early attempts to understand the universe. These ideas penetrated Confucian and Taoist philosophy, and they became even more prominent in the Taoist religion. Taoist priests are actually licensed to perform rituals for each of the particular traditions. They also perform many other rituals in festivals throughout the year. The best known rituals are those surrounding the Lunar New Year, which are celebrated with dragon dances and firecrackers to chase away demons. Taoist religion has existed in different forms in different geographic regions, but its central message has remained strong and tenacious for thousands of years. It's a tradition that responds to and fulfills the human need to relate to the natural environment and the universe of the spirits.